Hey, Luis. I'm going to go ahead and do this. See if this is working. It seems to be. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do this interview just like this, so it'll be a little faster for me, and I hope it's sufficient for you. So you're saying, what compelled you, me rather, to choose film editing as a career? The fact is, when it comes to film editing or digital editing, of course, two sides of the same coin. I think you'll discover more and more that that's just one task. Even if you're editor all the time, and say you go to the top of your field and all you do is edit, you're still going to have to be able to do a host of things. So for me, I was in education, yet I had a business where I did a whole lot of taping and interviews and whatnot, and then editing that down and putting in the B-roll and deciding which shots, deciding how much movement. Initially, a lot of that would have to have been decided in advance. Now, of course, if you have a digital camera and you're shooting in larger than 4K, you can grab different parts of the shot. You can change your composition completely. You can do all your zooms and everything in post. You can also change your background in post. You can do a rack focus in post. So for editing, for me, in terms of deciding it as a career, I just saw it as a skill set that I needed. It was a tool that I needed. So early, when realistically back when, whether it's actual film stock, which I haven't used, but even back when it was actually acetate tape, it was, I needed to have things edited down. So I did that. And then I found that I like anything, if you put your mind to it, you do it enough times, you get really good at it. But then that's the craft. But the art is the different part. That is where you're starting to think what looks good, what will help tell the story. Even something as simple as interviews with they're not all headshots. You'd edit in all this other B-roll, and it goes from really simple to really complex. And then if you're doing this for a career, then every single thing you're doing is you're deciding, well, how much am I getting paid for this? If you're, especially, I had my own business, so if it was a low budget piece, they would get minimal editing. If they had paid a lot, then they would get a lot more quality editing. So that's a big answer to what compelled me to choose film editing. Like I said, it's just one tool in a tool bag, and there are very few people who will be able to do that consistently. And then there are also very few people whose career won't entail like 5 or 6 different completely different parts. So basically, if you're doing anything with video, then you need that as one of your tools. What would be some advice on getting into film editing and some tips on being successful in this career? I think that really generating a portfolio. So if you're doing stuff. And you aren't getting paid, then you need to come up with projects that are finite, that you can have a beginning, a middle, and end to, that you can come up with, some kind of storyboard in advance. You can have some kind of a script. You can maybe, if it's interviews and working with other people, you can still set that up and how you want that to look. And then if you have a storyboard and you have a script and you have a product and they're short, then people are going to see that you have some vision and you have some talent. So I would say getting into it is generating quite a bit for basically your own portfolio, and then trying to get little pieces you can do. And there's no reason you can't volunteer. You go down to Brother Wolf in Asheville, and they help these dogs. Say, hey, I want to put together some social media for you because I think I like what your program does. You start doing that. There again, you have portfolio. So after you have something, then you have a fashion for convincing others that you're gifted, you're good at this. So there's that. 3, how much education did it take for you to get in the career? The fact is, I think that it's possible to probably drop out of high school and get into the career at some level. But what if you actually wanted to know the fundamentals of the career, fundamentals of whether editing and shooting, editing and scripting, editing and fill in the blank, those fundamentals. What a blessing to set aside 2 years of your life or more to study your craft. So I tell you, you can get into it and make money just by having access to some decent equipment. And the equipment prices have fallen to the point that if I shoot something on a decent camera like I am right now, or if I shoot something on a high-end high-end iPhone, it's really your eye that's going to be catching it more than the technology behind it. Okay, so back to the education part. Yeah, but give yourself a couple years to study a craft. That's a remarkable blessing, because once you're doing it, you're just doing whatever you're paid to do. You aren't being artistic all the time. You are instead, you're going to work. And if when you are into it initially, it might be 24/7 occupation, but afterwards, dang, you have a life to lead. So you have to. I'll stop with that. That's not the education. Okay, can you summarize what you did on a day-to-day basis? Yeah, when my company was Shadowbox Design, and a lot of what we would do is we would contact major print, education bookmakers, people in print. So if whatever company it was Pearson, Prentice Hall, Addison Wesley, and W.W. Norton. There were about 7 or 8 large companies that did print for basically higher ed textbooks. So we when the whole internet started happening, we started soliciting those companies, saying, "Hey, you need some online material." And then it became that I was doing primarily video work for these companies, where they would fly me around to interview experts, interview educators, and then interview expert educators and put it together. So if we were doing a piece, say, on mergers and acquisitions, it turns out that finance books have chapters on mergers and acquisitions. Well, I would interview the author of that particular piece, and I would have experts in the field at a table, and then I would be interviewing, like we went out and interviewed the head of Delta Airlines, who had just acquired another airline, and that was the kind of thing, was trying to solicit those projects, get those projects, and then what I would do is I would draw up a series of basically designs on the what's going to be the UI or the user interface, and then after I did that, they would sign off, and then I would say, "Here's what the design," and I'll hire a designer. The designer would say, "Here's what it's going to look like," and then they would make changes, and we'd have several candidates, and then they would sign off. And then they know who I'm going to interview, so they're paying for all this. So I'm flying out to different places and setting up the interviews. But before I get there, I've got to, like I said, I'll just go to the president of Delta Airlines. I've got a fairly significant interview with this guy. I'm doing it at his desk. So I get there, and I have told his executive assistant in advance, I'm going to need an hour in his office without him there to set up the shot. So I'm setting up lighting, how much backlight, how much reinforcement, or I'm going to need, all in a space where really they're going to want me to clean it all out in short order. So after that, we go back, we edit it down, and then once again, we give candidates to the publisher. The publisher says that, this is going to work for me. And then once they sign off on it completely, we have to decide, or rather the contract would say whether we then support it. So say we do all this shooting and this video and it's great, and then they move from Windows XP to Windows 7, and now the things don't work, or they don't look good, or we go from 4:6 to 16:9. Well, all of a sudden everything's wrong. So how much support you give to what you create is also part of the process now, because if it's going to be used more than once, or it's going to be used more than a run, well, that's important, right? Okay. What did your work schedule look like weekly? Yeah, like I said, pretty much that. It was, it would be soliciting business, getting business, writing up, and designing what it is they wanted. Sometimes I'd be doing the design before I could solicit the business, because I would have to have a design in mind when I reached out to them, saying, "Hey, here's what we can make for you." Then after we solicit, receive the business, get the business, then I plan, I hire a designer, I hire, things are popping and running around right here. I hope I haven't lost my camera. Okay, so we after all of that, then we create it and we package it. So from week to week, it was a lot of that. And then I would hire people to do the same stuff I was doing. And then I would hire a graphic designer, and I would hire someone to write the code for the actual interface itself. So it was a break off on that for week after week after week. The trouble was, it was really 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. I'd get calls constantly because I had clients all over the country. Okay. Did you ever have to complete writings? If so, yeah. I mean, if you mean by format of writing, how we do it, everything is PDF as a final output. But in terms of what I generated concepts and storyboards, and then I would also include a UI for how this was going to be presented, because really I wasn't just doing this to show on the big screen, because there won't be big screens. And then to show on the television, well, there won't be televisions. The fact is, everything we make is going to be on some variation of a digital interface. How big that footprint is, whether it's the size of your wall or whether it's the size of your watch. You've got to have that in mind. So the format that I'd be designing for was I would be coming up with wireframes for these with concept ideas and saying how the UI would look like, and then giving them a sense of what the high quality image that's going to be part of that. But really, a lot of it is the words. What editing programs do you use, and how long do you get comfortable with them? If you are, it's the platform for me more than it is the application, because they're so similar. But if you work with a Mac and you're doing, name a Mac editing device, they're all going to be very similar. And, the more you spend and the faster your machine is, the more you can do. But in terms of the applications themselves, anything that's on a Mac, I have walked through. And then on the PC side, once again, there's quite a few things you can use on that side. I tend to use Vegas. And it's now Magix Vegas. It's really easy. I don't want to think about the editing. I just want to make it happen. And I don't do a whole lot of dressing stuff up in post. So for what it's worth, I try to use the most simple application I can. But between Macs and the Adobe products that sort of also go traffic with those, and then on the PC side, I've used dozens of applications. I don't have a preference, but the fact is, if you work on it with editing for a week, if you haven't sort of got your groove in after a week, then you probably ought not. We're working with technology. What projects did I work on? Like I said, most of the stuff that I did with my company and other companies was the same kind of stuff I was saying. A lot of it was interviews. A lot of it was working with people. Not, nothing that's based in fiction, no narrative storytelling or any of that. Let's see. And then my time keeps stopping on this. I hope that isn't the actual recording stopping. Do you enjoy the career path? Yeah, but the fact is, because I was the head of the company, a lot of what I did was sell. So I had to go to different companies, primarily in Boston, and pitch. And then I'd be at different conferences trying to sell, trying to pitch. And what happened is I was basically ancillary to their primary business. But once people in that industry realized that it wasn't ancillary, then they started making it in-house. So I knew that us as a support unit, the company, that business model was changing. So I thought it was good for a time, but it's a little soul robbing at the end of the day. Hope that helps. Thanks so much.